All right. I am, I believe I'm not mute. I'm going to check some things to make sure that we are, in fact, live. We're
You,
live over
you
on
sound great.
X. We are live over on YouTube. Perfect. So that means I can introduce my guests here. We have Kyle Farnworth. I'll hope to say that right.
It's
Who
okay.
is,
Everyone throws an S in there. I'm used to it.
I have to like consciously try not to do that. So we got
Well,
it.
there was a, not to interrupt your intro, but there was a baseball pitcher named Kyle Farnsworth, and I still get tagged on X. People trying to reach out to him, being like, "Oh, I loved what you did for the Cincinnati Reds." I'm like, "Well, I write books, but thanks."
I mean, you could buy my book, mistakes, happy coincidence. All right, but you are a teacher and educator in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Your debut novel Whalers was a finalist for the Best Mystery Thriller by Kindle Book Awards, a finalist for Best Debut Novel by Independent Author Network, and was shortlisted for Editor's Choice Awards by Readsy Discovery, which is all very impressive. But today we are here because we have a new book, or he has a new book coming out called Medusa, or Men Entombed in Winter, which is a literary cult thriller that I'm going to kick it over to let Kyle go ahead and pitch for us.
Yeah, yeah. First off, thanks for having me. Thanks for being a part of my Medusa week, my press tour. Really happy to be here. Medusa, yeah. I mean, Medusa is a novel. I generalize it as a cult thriller. It's a multi-generation novel, right? So it follows my main character is Peter Holloway and his relationship with the title character Medusa. But as the novel unfolds, it becomes almost less about them and more about their children who are affected by some of the radical thinking that they employ as they start their own society. Right? It's Medusa is about it's a group of college students that travel to northern Maine to start their own society in the wilderness, try to start their own utopian society because they feel like they can do things better if they do it on their own. And it really explores that idea of what happens when people who are almost too smart for their own good try to build something better than what was laid out in front of them. And really, like what unfolds over the course of the novel is like not necessarily just like a story about a formation of a cult, but really like an exploration in the cyclical nature of trauma and what it means to kind of give up yourself and your identity to belong to this bigger thing. Um, and really, at its heart, that's what the novel's really about.
Got my mute button on, so let me take that off and find my mouse. Awesome. So thank you for that introduction. So is this is your second novel then, I'm assuming?
Yes, yeah, this is my second one.
Okay, when did your first one come out?
First one came out in the early part of last year. That one was called Whalers, right? You could see it behind
Yep.
me. Um, yeah, loved Cincinnati Reds. Yeah, Whalers came out. I think in late January, early February of last year. Now we got Medusa.
Wow. I'm so you got the one book out. I'm curious. I generally like to ask, from a process perspective, when an idea, when you had the idea versus how long it took you to get this out. So if Whalers came out last year, we're doing like kind of a book a year kind of a cadence. So did you start writing this one right after that one was published? Were you working on them together? Kind of tell me how did this come together?
Yeah, it's interesting because I started working on Whalers, and I think when I finished Whalers, like when I finished my first draft of Whalers, I was really looking for something like what's going to be next, right? I'm always writing something, so I think what people underestimate is how long it takes to edit and like go through your developmental edits, go through your proofreads, and that kind of like that becomes monotonous, right? So I'm always looking for the next thing. So when I would say when I finished writing like my first draft of Whalers and I was in that like editing, waiting for my editor to reach back out to me, that's when I started Medusa. So that was probably about maybe 6 months prior to Whalers coming out. So I'd say that even though they came out like 1 year after the next, I was working on Medusa long before Whalers was published and out in the world, which is a really interesting. It's an interesting feeling when I have a book that comes out and people are asking, "Oh yeah, Whalers, love Whalers," but in my mind, I'm like, I'm 6 months in to writing a book about cults. That's awesome, and I can't wait for another year to go by for you to read this one. Yeah, it was a really interesting experience having both of them sort of be worked on at the same time.
Okay, so you're a teacher, so you're not like you're not a young man. So I'm curious as far as how long have you been writing in general? You mentioned that you're always kind of writing something.
Yeah, I've been writing my whole life. I still remember when I was a kid. I mean, I had to be like 6 years old. My parents got me one of those like mail publish things where you draw a picture and you write one line and then you mail it off and they send you back a book. That was like a 90s thing. I don't know if people remember. But I remember like that was the first story I ever wrote. It was about me and my friends playing basketball with dinosaurs, and I still have it like up on my Instagram page.
It's
But
pretty nice.
then, I mean, I've been writing stories for most of my life through college, and then when I first got into teaching, it kind of like took a backseat a little bit as I sort of established my career. Um, and as a teacher for 8, 9 years, I really didn't do all that much writing. And then it kind of came back with a vengeance a couple of years ago where I was like, you know what, this is something that I really want to pursue, and I don't want to let the rest of my life go by without having done this thing that I'm passionate about just because I have a 9 to 5 job that I'm working every day. Um, and then here we are a couple years later, and I got 2 books out.
Awesome. So how do you fit it all in? Are you a 5 a.m. writers club, or are you kind of the burn the midnight oil?
Oh, I'm a Saturday afternoon kind of a writer.
All right.
I like coffee shops. I know people always ask like, "Oh, you don't like a quiet little spot in your home office?" But I like putting my headphones in and going to a coffee shop, and I'll sit and write for a couple of hours on a Saturday afternoon. I'm also lucky enough as a teacher that I mean, I have school vacation weeks, I have summers, right? I do a lot of work
Yep.
in the summers. I wrote a large majority of Medusa over the course of last summer. Um, just because writing becomes my 9 to 5, right? Where that's where I'm focusing my time and attention. Because I don't have to go into the building every day.
So what's in your headphones while you're sitting at the coffee shop?
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, honestly, I'm an Apple Music guy. Everyone gives me a hard time. Everyone's like, "How are you not on Spotify?" I like Apple Music, and Apple Music gives me my essentials, and I usually just go to my most listened to, most liked songs and hit shuffle, and kinda they just disappear into the background. I like indie rock, so it's not too loud and overpowering, but it's nice and melodic that it kinda gets me into the swing of things. I've done, like, lo-fi on YouTube, but the words and the music doesn't really distract me all that much.
That's impressive because I am definitely a words and music does distract me kind of person.
Yeah.
so
I don't
so
yeah, I
I give
kinda
you
just,
credit
like
just to be able to just take it in and have it be there.
yeah, I kinda just get locked in, and I'm in flow state, as the kids say, and a couple hours later, I'm like, "Well, this is a pretty decent chunk that I put into today." And, like, honestly, I'd say that to my students all the time that, like, success is prolonged effort over time. So when you put books together, I think writing is one of those things where an hour a day for a year goes a long way.
Yeah,
And I think people would be surprised how much you can create in that amount of time.
gotta make the time. The best way to be a writer is to write.
Mhm.
All right,
I
so
always just make it exist, right? That's the number one step 1, make it exist.
exactly. Okay, so you're right. This is a like a cult thriller. What inspired your genre of choice, like to pick more of a literary or thriller type of category here?
Yeah, so I write books that I wanna read, right?
Hmm.
I'm a literary fiction guy through and through. I don't read much like fantasy or sci-fi, or that's not really my territory. Um, but I like writing books that make you think. And I've always been interested in cults. Um, I think when I was in the process of writing this and drafting the first draft of this book, I think I watched every cult documentary on YouTube on Netflix, like Wild Wild Country and Waco, and even the one about like the social media cults that are forming in the modern age. I listened to a great podcast about Synanon, which was a drug rehab program that kind of spiraled into a cult in California. And that kind of thinking has always fascinated me. So when this one was coming about, it was really trying to find the way that I could blend together like my love of like literary fiction, my love of novels like East of Eden, combined with like a modern day take on the cult. And thrillers is just naturally the way that my writing style goes because again, I want to keep you on the edge of your seat. I want to keep you with cliffhangers. I want you to read the book in one night and be like, "Oh my goodness, how awesome was that?" So I think that naturally kind of lends itself to writing a thriller, and I think all of those elements kind of came together with this one in a really great way.
Awesome. So you entered your previous book into a lot of competitions. Are you planning on doing something similar to this one?
Yeah, I think so. I think as we talked about a little bit before we went live, but like as a self-published author, like all press is good press, and the only way to make press is to reach out to people. And I think these some of these awards are a great way to do it. Um, Honestly, like a lot of them, they don't cost a ton of money,
Hmm.
and hey, I'm going to send you a copy of my book with $25 and I'm going to wait 10 months and then hopefully I get an email down the line that says congratulations, we really loved your book. And then that's just more, I think that's more press and that's more like legitimacy almost because I feel like that's with self-published writers. I feel like legitimacy is something that a lot of us are really desperate for. We want somebody to be like, "Hey, this is worth your time." And I think entering in awards like that is a good way to make people realize that this is something that's worth their time and attention.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of those things that even if you don't necessarily win, like you could be shortlisted or you could get reviews
Sure.
out
Yeah.
there. Like it is press and it doesn't hurt. It can never hurt to enter the thing. Assuming you have, the $25 to kick over for the
Yeah.
thing, because you can't win without trying. It's like the lottery ticket. I'm never gonna win the lottery if I never have a ticket.
Well, and I say that I was talking to my cousin about this the other day. That's what I say about like writing a book in general. Like follow your dreams, right? If you write a book, you never know. You could have the next Dune on your hands. You never know unless you write the book, right? You never know if you're going to win the awards unless you submit your book to the awards. And that's sort of my way of thinking about it.
Yeah, so for this one in particular, it sounds like you had some idea in your head or like floating around about the interesting nature of cults, and it sounds like you like to think about the psychological, hence the literary side where it's like,
Mm.
okay, like trauma and interesting threads there. So where did the idea for this plot and the story come from? Was it just a pre-existing interest that you decided to explore? Did you just watch something at some point, or where did the idea come from?
So I don't want to like get myself canceled, but like I'm a pantser. Like I don't make
Okay,
outlines. Like
got it.
that not my style at all. I write entirely on instinct. Or I write what do I think the next chapter should be in order for this to be the best book that it can be. So really, like if I go back to the beginning, um, had this idea. I'd love to write a book about a cult. And I was teaching my sixth graders at the time the story of Perseus and Medusa, right? And they're fascinated by Perseus and Medusa, and they're asking me questions about it. And then I start doing my, as their teacher, I got to do my background research, and I started stumbling upon like all of the different interpretations of the myth, like going back to like Ovid's Medusa and Metamorphosis, and thinking about well, like that's a really interesting story. So I wrote the first chapter and I didn't name the cult leader because to tell you the truth, I had no idea who the cult leader was when I wrote the first chapter. Um, and then I got this idea about doing almost a play on the Medusa freezing people in her cave as Medusa freezing men in her cult. And really, I just ran with that idea. Um, and like I said, I don't outline anything, so a lot of it is just I pants my way through a first draft, and then I take a big step back and I look at it and I say, all right, well, like what do I have here? And then I spend the next 8 months of my life trying to make it as good as I possibly can, and that's how this one worked.
Awesome. Okay, that makes sense. So, kind of had the inspiration from your class. You had the idea of doing the cult thing. Wrote out the first draft, and now it's refinement. So, how do you what is your process for getting that refinement done? Do you get beta readers? Do you do like read throughs yourself? Like, tell kind of help me work through the second part of this to get to the more final
Yeah,
draft.
I think I think for that, like once it exists and once it a thing, then you're kind of just sculpting the clay. I mean, I do a lot of reading, so I take a lot of inspiration from the things that I'm reading.
Hmm.
Try to like embed some of those ideas. But as far as process goes, I don't want to call it an entirely rewrite second draft, but I'll go through it in its entirety again. Then I have a really great developmental editor. Her name's Jenna Love Schrader. I found her on Readsy. We've worked together on both of my books. She gives some incredible feedback for a developmental edit. I'll take those into consideration. I'll do another draft, and then I start thinking about beta readers. Right, I don't love sending it out before it's done to too many people, but I do have some people that I really trust that I'll send it to. I'll get their feedback. And then once you get to the proofreading and editing stage, for me, I'm a red pen kind of guy. So
Hmm.
I submitted it long ago on Amazon KDP and got a proof copy, just so I could mark up like a physical copy of the book. And I'll do that like 2 or 3 times before I'm confident that it's where I want it to be. And for that, I'm looking at making sure I'm not like repeating words and phrases too close together, and making sure there's no typos. And really, for me, the only way to do that is to like sit down with a physical book and read it like a reader, because I know if I grab a book off of my bookshelf and I'm reading it and I see a typo, like I will see that typo. And I like to think like with my own novel, that's my best way of editing.
Awesome. Yeah, like my husband was my editor for my first, and I gave him a physical copy, and he was red penning the
Yeah.
actual physical copy of the book. Yeah.
Well, that's my teacher background too. Like I almost treat it like one of my students' essays, and I'm just marking it up and crossing it out and being like writing awkward in the margins for any language that like doesn't really fit, and then go through it again. And I think by the time it's ready, I've put that time in, and I'm pretty confident that it's where it needs to be.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you write what you want to read. So
Mm.
this is definitely tailored towards you. What who is your audience as well? Like, so beyond I like this, like who do you see as the ideal audience for this kind of story?
Well, I think the perfect person to read this book would be somebody that is like interested in literary fiction first and foremost, which I think with literary fiction comes that like there's an expectation about pacing and about introspection. I think with
Hmm.
literary fiction that isn't necessarily the case with just like a mainstream thriller. Um, and with that idea, somebody that's drawn to psychological, character driven. I don't want to say dark, but can be dark at times because human nature can be dark at times. I think if you're the kind of reader that gravitates towards something that's going to make you think about not just cults, like I said, but about like what it means to be a human being, and really get drawn to something that when you finish that last page, you kind of have to pause and think about it for a moment. I think that's my ideal reader. I had an ARC reader that was really interested in the ending of Medusa, right? Was like very curious about why it ends the way that it does, and I think it really just like speaks to genre, right? It's all about like making people pause and think about what it means to be alive. That's what I'm really interested in. So if you're a reader that you like dark psychological thrillers that are leaned on character driven fiction, I think that this book is definitely for you.
Beautiful. All right, so you have your Medusa week going on where you're going on a lot of these shows to
Medusa
promote.
week. Oh yeah.
So I'm only one person that she'll be talking to. I'm curious though, as far as your approach to getting this out into the hands of people once, the hype is over kind of thing. Like how
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
continue to try and make those sales aside from, we talked about the competition a little bit.
Well, I think for me, my well, I'll start here. I went to a conference in Boston. It was like the TBR Writers, Publishers, Agents Conference. Really interesting, just being there with writers and agents and publishers and having those conversations. And I went to one that was about marketing, and the advice that really stuck with me in regards to marketing a book like Medusa was the fact that people buy books that people they trust are talking about.
Hmm.
And that really stuck with me, right? Where people don't buy books so much that are like taking out hundreds of dollars on like Amazon ads or like Facebook ads. Like, sure, you might have a cool cover and a cool tagline, but when that person that you've been following on Instagram for a really long time posts, "Hey, I just read an awesome book," that's the book that you're going to buy. So that essentially for me translates to I got to get this book in the hands of as many people as humanly possible, even if I'm giving it out for free. And that was my number one strategy going into this launch was I wanted people to read this and I wanted them to know that, listen, I think you'll love this book. I'm just going to send you a PDF or an EPUB and I want you to just read it. And if you enjoy it, just give me a review on Goodreads or post about it on your socials. And I think that's really drawn some pretty good attention, and that's really led to me forming some really good connections with some of the people in the writing community that have really backed my book. Um, and I think that instead of just pumping advertisements and pumping social media, really doing your best to say again the legitimacy, like, hey, this is a book that you need to read. Trust you don't have to trust me, but I know you trust X, Y, or Z in their opinion. So that's sort of my go-to, at least for this one.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I know that you reached out to me a while back, so
Oh yeah.
yeah, you were on it to try and get the pipe there going.
Well, I think that's the
So
only way I could set up a week like this, right? Like not only am I going on your show, but I did an interview with the Dadlit Pod last night. I'm going on Booked tomorrow, and I'm going on with Josh already overbooked on Thursday. And not like unlike you just said, I reached out to all of them in August, September, and November and kind of set up this time to say, this book's going to be coming out on this day in February. Let's talk about it.
so when you're looking for some of these people that might spread the word, I'll know a lot of the folks that are in the indie community. We reach out and we do different arcs or things. So maybe you're arcing with different authors, or but some of it could be like reaching out to like a bookstagrammer or like a booktuber or something like that. So I'm curious if you've kind of tried some of those avenues for this as well.
Yeah, so a lot of the people that I'm talking with this week are from X
Hmm.
because this was like we said, I reached out way back in like August. But more recently, I've tried to get myself involved in Threads just cuz that's just a whole different community of people who love books and who
Hmm.
love to read and write. And there's a lot of bookstagrammers on Threads. I don't know if I've been incredibly successful in reaching out to some of the more high profile ones. I've sent my fair share of DMs that feel like they never say read. I don't think any of those big time people are looking at their DMs. But I did make a post on Threads about how, hey, I got these physical copies of my new novel that's coming out in a couple of weeks. Who should I send them to? And it got a lot of engagement. I think it had like 125 likes and 83 comments. So I put all 85 people that commented in like a little raffle and I spun a wheel and I ended up sending out like five or six of them. So we'll see if any of them kind of come back positively. But I think reaching out to people and posting and just being passionate about what you're doing and what you're writing and really showing that like you believe in it. I think that's the number one thing to try to garner people's attention.
Yeah, that there's a lot of truth to that. Like you gotta, you are your biggest advocate for getting your book out there.
And I don't think it's easy either, right? Because I think like writers by nature are introverted more than extroverted, right? Like you know me, I put my hood up, my headphones on, I'm in the coffee shop typing on my laptop. I'm not talking to anybody.
Yeah,
But at the same time, if you're not screaming from the rooftops that like you wrote an awesome book and everybody should read it, then why would anybody else, right? So
for sure.
it's definitely not easy, but again, I think everybody's trying their best.
So tell me about this cover.
Ooh.
I'd love to
Yeah.
know.
So a great cover artist that I got off of Reedsy is Peter Selgin is his name. He designed this cover. Um, we had a lot of collaboration, a lot of back and forth. Really, my goal was I wanted to capture the snowy isolationism of the pine wilderness of northern Maine, right? Because that's what so much of this book is about. Like this book does not exist without its setting. So I said that's what's got to be on the cover. Um, the red circle that, interestingly enough, if I grab like my copy, what I love about it is it wraps all the way around the spine to the back, which I think is like so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That's a major part of the cult dynamics, right? Because in the novel, uh Medusa has this game that she likes to play where she has 10 of the men in the community go out into the woods and get inside a red circle. Last one to leave gets status in the commune. And what essentially unfolds is because there's no other rules, the people who are prone to violence are violent, right? The people who are prone to being shy are sitting there shyly. And you really get to find out about who the people in the commune are through their actions in what she calls the game. So I thought the red circle on the cover was just another really strong, like thematic symbol
Mm-hmm.
that is also incredibly striking to have that red on top of all of the white and the black. So I love how it came out.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's a very interesting, like eye catching type of cover. I like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We went back and forth for a while. I think when we first started putting it together, right? It was like, how do we incorporate like some of the symbolism? How do we make it so that it's not just pine tree wilderness, right? And ultimately, I think what we settled on came out really nice.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so have you started your next project already?
So I feel like I'm always starting projects that I'm not sure I'm not sure what the next project is. I got a couple of different things that I've been playing around with. Um but AB Mr. Beast was a direct inspiration of putting a bunch of people in a circle and seeing who comes out last. That's I love that you caught on that because that's 100% yes. Um I essentially I have two big ideas that I've started to mess around with. One is a novel about brothers who have to road trip across the United States to go attend their mother's funeral. I think that's really interesting, with those like dynamics between brothers that are stuck in a car together for long periods of time going across the United States. That one I really like a lot. But then I also have this other one that I started recently that is about a band from the 90s that broke up in the early 2000s but gets pulled back together. What pulls them back together at this point, I'm not 100% sure, but that's just kind of how I write. I put ideas down on paper and make it exist, as I said. So I think the next Kyle Farnworth novel it'll be one of those two, I'm pretty sure.
Awesome. So yeah, that's fun. How is it? I guess I'm one of those people that try and do like one thing at a time, or else my brain just like I probably end up with way too many projects. So I'm interested that you have two ideas that you're actively working on. Is Are you able to work on the multiple things at one time without going
Well,
crazy, or will you eventually pick a winner?
I think eventually I will pick a winner. But that doesn't mean the other one's gone, right? The other one's still
Yeah.
sitting in a drive somewhere. Um but like for me like I wrote the band novel, right? I did 3 chapters of it, and then I was kinda like, "I'm not really sure where exactly to go from here. I love this idea, but, like, as a guy who does an outline, I'm not 100% sure," right? So then I'm like, "Oh, well, I also have this other idea. Let me play on this," right? And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, down the line, I those 2 things, like, collide in some way where, like, the brothers that are on the road trip, now they're not on a road trip to go to their mother's funeral anymore. They're on a road trip to go see the band that's getting back together because like you never know, right? You
Yep.
never know how these things unfold. Um like especially for me, I never really know what I have until I have it. And then all of a sudden I take a look back and I say, well, this is actually pretty good. Because like I'm an instinctual writer. I write 6 chapters, and for chapter 7, I just ask myself, like, where's the best place for the story to go? And it may take me 2 weeks to figure that out, but when I get it, that's when it goes down.
Awesome. So, how do you hone your craft? Like, what do you how do you what is your process to make sure that you're always improving, or, you know, that your product that you're putting out is the best that it can be?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question based on, like, the last week on X, right,
Right?
with
Yeah.
people just, like, arguing. Yeah, I don't know if you're leading me in that direction, but it for the uninitiated, people have just been screaming at each other on X about like if novelists should have to read books. And I think for me, I'm perfecting my craft by reading all the time and by always having a book that I'm currently looking at and not just looking at like the books that I would naturally gravitate towards, but also like what's new and popular, right?
Mhm.
Like my favorite book of all time is East of Eden. I love books like The Secret History was something that was this novel was heavily inspired by. But right now I'm reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I don't really know how I feel about Crawler Carl, but it's something that like, man, this thing is taking the world by storm. Like I got to read this and figure out what it is about this book that people love. And I think when you can identify that and you can use it in your own craft, I think that's definitely a way to make yourself a better writer overall.
Timothy
Oh, that
has a
do you write books you'd let your students read and have any of them read either? That's a really interesting question. Um, so what I always tell my kids, so I teach middle schoolers, right? So there's two ways that you can answer that question. First way to answer that question is I'm not like pumping my books to my students. They're not my audience, right? Like I don't write books for middle schoolers. If have any of them read it, maybe, but let me tell you about the modern age like middle schooler. If they're reading on their own time, something that I didn't assign them, one of the most incredible things that would ever happen to me in my classroom. Right? I'm having a hard time just getting them to read the books that I assign, let alone like Medusa or Men Entombed in Winter, like my cult literary fiction thriller. Um, if they wanted to read it and talk to me about it, I'd be more than happy to. But I think I think they're on TikTok and they're not as interested in some of the things that as much as I want to believe that they think I'm like the coolest person in the world and they want to read my books, I don't know if they think I'm the coolest person in the world and want to read my books.
he says he says it's a valid take for
I
sure.
think that's a fair take, right? Like
Yeah.
in like my seventh graders, I was talking about this last night with Dan Roberts on the Dad Lit Pod. Like they just read The Outsiders, right? And like The Outsiders is like 115 pages, and it just blew their minds how cool that book was. Like that's what my job is. My job is to give them books like The Outsiders and say, hey, like we're gonna break this down thematically. We're gonna look at Ponyboy's hair as a symbol for his identity, and hopefully, when you end those 115 pages, you loved it to death. Right? That's my goal.
Yeah. Try and get the love of reading into them. I like
Yeah,
that
like, and
because
it starts at that age, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, for me, I remember my mother getting angry with me because when I was in middle school, I was reading the um, Lemony Snicket, right, series of unfortunate events, and I'd be like, "We got to go to Barnes and Noble because I got to get the series of unfortunate events book," and then I'd go home and I'd read the whole thing And then the next day I'd say, we got to go
Gotta
back
go
to Barnes and
back.
Noble. She'd be like, we were just at Barnes and Noble yesterday. Um, I don't know if it's like that so much anymore. I know for some kids, but I think that the large majority of them are they're not as interested in reading as I wish they were.
Yeah, I feel that. I have I have three of my own at this moment, and yeah, it's. I wish that I appreciate that they are doing it as much as they are
Mhm.
at this point.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
But there's room to definitely improve. It's hard to have the book compete against the brain rot.
Yeah. If they're reading the books that I assign in English class, that's a win for me.
Yeah. All right. So what's what's next for you?
So, like, I mean, after my little press tour here, I've been thinking a lot about like next steps, right? I'll still be on social media, right? Still tweet about my book, still, update people on how my writing is going. But a little part of me after this week wants to kind of like go back and disappear into my little hole and figure out which one of those two options is going to be next.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense for me. Um, I can market as much as I want. I can market by posting on X every once in a while, but again, for me, like I don't necessarily write my stuff to be like a New York Times bestseller. Would it be really cool if I was a New York Times bestseller? Sure, but I think the idea of a book a year for 10 years of my life is really cool, right? And I would
Hmm.
love to like look back on like my last 10 years and be like, these are the 10 books that I wrote, and these are the 10 things that I'm going to like leave behind to like the next generation. Um and I think the only way to do that is to like shut up and write. So I think like next steps for me, I think I'm going to figure out what's next and kind of run with it, and then hopefully do another one of these interviews with you sometime in 2027, right?
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be
I'm
awesome.
yeah. I would love to know. So a lot of people are aspiring, they're either working on a project or they would like to be writers. I've met many of these folks. What would be your advice, especially as a teacher, right,
Mm,
to help them achieve what you've achieved as far as actually getting published material out into the world that you're proud of?
mhm. So for me, my number one writing advice, and I'd say this to anybody, is you got to let the ego slip back long enough to finish, right? So like I think the I think the problem with people that get stuck on like writing that first book is that I think people expect that first book to be like Tolkien, or like they expect that first book to be like Steinbeck, right? When the first draft I don't think is ever going to be like that. I think the first draft is the draft that you're doing just to very simply like make that book exist. So like to summarize in one quick sentence, my best advice is just make it exist, because you can't craft your sculpture if you don't have the clay in front of you, right? And that first draft is the clay. So I think you write it and you admit to yourself that this first draft might not be very good. And I might finish this and I might look back at it and I might delete 30,000 words from my first draft because I don't like them anymore. But if you wrote 90, you still got 60 like sitting there in front of you to mess around with. I think that's the best advice. Uh, at the same time, I would also say you definitely cannot do it alone. You could try to do it alone, right? But doing it alone is really hard. And I think you have to acknowledge the fact that if you want help in your book, you're going to probably have to pay somebody to help you with your book. You're going to have to pay an editor. You might have to pay a cover artist unless you're incredible at like graphic design, which I am not. Um, so being willing to admit to yourself that I'm not going to do this perfectly right away. and that I'm going to need help from other people to make this as good as it possibly can be. I think those are the two major hurdles that people need to get over, right? Make it exist and then ask for help in making it better. I think that's how you put a book together.
And there's a element of suspension of ego for both of those.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I think people get themselves into trouble, right? Like you work so hard on this book, but then you don't have anybody look at it and you just put it out. Like I found one of my big takeaways from Whalers, right, from my first book was when you finish that first draft, there's a good chance that you're still like a year away from publication. Right? When you finish that first like 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 words, whatever, you might think to yourself like, "Oh my god, Amazon KDP, publish." But like probably there's another like 8 to 10 months of like hard work and effort that has to go into this in order for it to be like as good as you want it to be. And I think people get themselves into trouble if you put it out too early and then you get that negative feedback and you're like, "Oh, well, like just kidding, it's not actually done." So yeah, so like patience I also feel like is really important in putting a good book out there, like admitting to yourself that like you might have some things that you need to change and you might come up with that incredible idea that really makes it a great book 6 months later. But I think that's just how it goes.
I second the patience. That was my school of hard knocks lesson.
It's not
I'd
easy,
love.
right?
It's very
You
easy to hit that publish button and then be
well, you
like, oh
want
shoot.
it to be out there, right? And again, speaking of like the ego piece of it too, like you want it to be out there because you want people to reach out to you and be like, "I read your book, it's awesome." Right? You're, like, looking for that, I think, like, as you're
Hmm.
putting a draft together and you're looking for somebody just to read it and tell you it's good so that you don't feel like you're crazy, right? Because 'Cause you're like, "I think this is good, but, like, I wrote this, so of course I think it's good." But
Yeah.
publishing it to get that feedback is I think that's a learning curve, I think, for a lot of people when they
I
get
don't
into
recommend that path. That
yeah.
path is
You
not the best path.
you don't want the first review to be, like, on a published draft, right? Like, you wanna send that early draft out to as many people as you can and be like, "Just give me your unbiased reader feedback." And honestly, finding people that can do that for you is tough as well. Because like, friends and family, you worry, like, they're gonna tell me it's good just because they like me. So, like, trying to find people in your circle to read early, it's not easy.
Not always, no. All right, Kyle, I would love to give you an opportunity to maybe read a little bit from Medusa.
Yeah, sure. I got a little short section that I can make my way through, and I do wanna say I'm choosing this section because I'm stuck in a blizzard right now, and my street still hasn't been plowed, and I haven't left the house in 3 days, and this section talks a little bit about appreciating the snow, and you'll hear it when I read it, but I got it on my bookshelf right back here. So this is from like the middle of chapter 2. Where you pick this up is that my protagonist, whose name is Peter, he just met a really interesting girl in one of his college courses named Medi, and Medi and him got partnered on a project. So she invites him to come visit her at her dorm room, so they can talk about how they're going to complete this work. And that's sort of where I'm going to pick it up from. It says throughout Peter's other classes and the rest of his seemingly ordinary day, he could not think of anything in the world but Medi. He racked their brief interaction over and over again in his mind, with the goal of figuring out if he had heard her name incorrectly before he said it wrong and embarrassed himself later on that night. He'd never met someone with that name before, not a man nor a woman. Did she say Maddie, as in Madison? Did she say Meggie, as in Meg or Margaret? He decided he would not use her name until he was sure. Snow fell on Dartmouth College that night, thick and silent, which always made Peter think of his father. Frank had a saying whenever winter came around: the cold and the snow are the cost of living in the Northeast. New England had it all. It was a place of good people. There were no tornadoes, no hurricanes, no earthquakes. It had sandy beaches and jagged coastlines, sprawling forests that turned a beautiful crimson in the fall, and colleges with names that were known across the world. The cold was the price of admission. We're lucky to have it, Frank would say, nodding out the window as he sipped a hot coffee or a hot chocolate, and Peter believed him. Whenever snow blanketed the streets, Peter felt that quiet flicker of gratitude his father instilled in him long ago. That way of seeing the world, finding fortune in the frozen, was the greatest gift his father ever gave him, and made him lucky to be Peter Holloway. I didn't think you were still coming, Medi said as he arrived at the front door of the Allen house. Sorry I'm late. You're not late, she said. Then why would you think I wasn't coming? The snow, she said, motioning upward. Come on in. She held the front door for him, head tilted as if she truly doubted whether or not he was going to come. Peter almost laughed. He'd have torn his nails bloody, shoved through a crowd of men 10 times his size just to stand in this spot. Her presence bent the air around her, made the doorway feel thinner, lighter, as though she carried some weather of her own. He stopped his thoughts from going too far. He just met the girl, and she was nothing more than a partner on a project. But her smile, her voice, her face, her eyes, there was something about her eyes. He could not get past them. There was a security guard sitting behind the desk in the lobby of the dorm. In front of him was a clipboard with the word visitors written in bold lettering across the top, names and times running down the page, but he didn't even bother asking Peter to sign into the building. In fact, he didn't even acknowledge him, only her. When she walked by, she said hello to him softly, and he nodded as if they had known each other for years. Enjoy your night, Medi, he said. Peter heard it correctly that time and retained it as best he could. I think that's a good place to stop for today. As I would say to
Excellent.
my kids as I read out loud. I think that's a good place to stop for today. Read for homework. I'll see you all tomorrow.
Yes, everybody read for homework. You got
Yeah, read
homework.
for homework.
All right, then. With that, I will let everybody know where they can find you and where they can find Medusa.
Sure. So Medusa or Men Entombed in Winter, it's live right now on Amazon. You can find links on all my socials. I'm Kyle Farnworth on X. I'm Kyle Farns on Threads. My website is kylefarnworth.com. I'd love it if you followed me on social media, subscribe to my website. You can find links to all of my books there. I think this is one that you're going to love. Mark, good to see you. I would really appreciate it if you took a look at the Goodreads page, read some of the reviews. I really think this is a book that a lot of people are going to love. So please, right, take a look at it. It's on KU as well if you are a Kindle Unlimited subscriber.
Awesome. Yes, for sure. Please do. I think I actually started it today on Kindle Unlimited. So now
Oh, so you were the one.
I started reading some pages. Only a few
I'm just
pages.
kidding. Yeah.
But yeah, so definitely check it out. I have enjoyed our conversation. I wish you the best of luck as you go through several more interviews with many different people.
Oh yeah, Medusa week. I appreciate you having me and taking the time. Means a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And everybody else, I hope you guys have a great day or evening. And I'm just checking out some last comments here before I go ahead and end the stream.